Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to MICCAI Student Board webinar series. And I'm Chanyeong Kim, a PhD student at Yonsei University, and currently serving as a local student liaison officer on the MICCAI Student Board. Me and Divyanshu will be your moderator today for this exciting panel discussion titled Navigating Reviews and Rebuttals, Best Practices from Outstanding Reviewers. We are thrilled to have amazing panelists who have made exceptional contributions to MICCAI Society. I'll be sharing their insights and what makes a great review and how to write effective rebuttals and more. So let's get started. Before we dive into main discussion, I would like to take a moment to introduce the MICCAI Student Board. The MICCAI Student Board was started in 2010, and since then, we have been dedicated to supporting and enhancing student engagement within the MICCAI community. Our team is made up of 14 amazing members, which leading different sectors working together as one team to bring valuable opportunities and events to MICCAI Society students. Yeah, so we are proud to support various student-led activities at the MICCAI conference. So if you're planning to attend MICCAI this year, make sure not to miss these events we support. So one of the highlights this year will be MSB Emerge workshop, which had a great start last year. This workshop is entirely student-led and is a platform for students to present their independent research. The submission deadline is June 1st, so yeah, don't miss out this amazing workshop. You can follow our activities and stay updated through our social media channels. So make sure to follow us and stay on track with our latest updates. All right, so let's get started. Yeah, this is the schedule for today's webinar, and we will cover 5 sessions today. Each section will cover this different aspect of the MICCAI review process. So now let's meet our amazing panelists, each of whom has made recognized for their outstanding reviewing at the MICCAI conference last year. Yeah, let's start with our first panelist, Ajabola. Can you tell us about your research interest and MICCAI submission experience that stands out?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Ajabola. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. My primary research area is the investigation of the use of hyperspectral imaging, which is a type of optical imaging modality, particularly for the characterization of latent tuberculosis. But generally, my research interests includes methods for skin lesion classification and segmentation, right? And particular use case of hyperspectral imaging is under that subset of methods for skin lesion classification and segmentation. So my experience with MICCAI started with in 2023. That was when I submitted my first paper to for the MICCAI main conference. It was also the first major paper from my PhD. I submitted it for MICCAI 2023, and it was rejected. The paper was rejected. It was early rejection, so there was no rebuttal, right? So it was very disappointing. The very first major output from my PhD just clearly, soundly rejected, no rebuttal. I was a disappointing start to my PhD in general. And I kind of began to have as it imposter syndrome, like, okay, wow. So does that mean that my work here it's not relevant? It's not even worth like a rebuttal. But I looked through the comments of the reviewers, and I understood my mistakes, and I appreciated I think about two of the reviewers who made a point in their comment that they said specifically that they are bare bones. There's a skeleton for a good paper in what I submitted, but this, and this was missing. That if I'd added this, that the paper, but like the skeleton, the backbone of the paper was novel, but the way I described the method, was a bit convoluted. There was a lot of handcrafting and all this. So basically, it gave me hope that it wasn't complete nonsense, right? Right. So, I took their comments positively, and, and I submitted another paper in 2024, and the paper was accepted for in MICCAI 2024 for oral presentation. And in addition to the comments from the reviewers, I attended a webinar like this. I think also it was the MSB's webinar where I listened to insights from reviewers. So I also got some good insights from that, and that informed my MICCAI 2024 paper, which was accepted. Also, after rebuttal, so it crossed the early reject, it went into rebuttal, and so that has been my summary of my experience with MICCAI. And also, for the first time in 2024, I applied to review, and I was selected among the attorney reviewers. So uh, I hope that you also get some good insights from the fellow panelists and me, just as I did last year. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Ajabola. And our next panelist is Benjamin. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Oh, hi everyone. I'm Benjamin. So I did my thesis at UCL, so in London. Then, so my main research interest at this point was segmentation of brain MRI, and I was specifically interested in developing domain agnostic methods to do this. So yeah, we came up with this framework that is called SynSeg. Maybe you guys have heard of it. So after this, I went to MIT to do my postdoc. So this was 2 years, and there I mainly worked on registration and rigid motion tracking in fetal time series. And now, so I've started as a full-time researcher in France, in Inria. And yeah, so it's been a few months. So I'm starting plenty of different projects now. So about my MICCAI experience, so I think I submitted my first paper in 2019 or something. Then I think I have like 3 or 4 MICCAI papers. I never got rejected. I was lucky enough. But yeah, I had like all possible outcomes. I had early accepts after rebuttals. Also, I've been reviewing for MICCAI quite a lot now, so I think I've been among the, I don't know, outstanding reviewers. I think you guys have like a fancy word for this, but I think I was that for like 3 years in a row. So yeah, I think I have a bit of experience now reviewing MICCAI papers. And also I do that also for like plenty of journals and middle as well, where now I started as a area chair. So hopefully I can give some useful tips for the new people that will review for the first time. Yeah, happy to share experience. All right.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. And let's move on to Finn. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I am Finn from Hamburg, PhD candidate at TU Hamburg, and right now I'm in the process of submitting my thesis. And my research is mostly about generative models for unsupervised anomaly detection, and also focusing on more general problems in computer vision in medical imaging, segmentation, or detection-wise. And my experience with MICCAI is also a bit mixed, I would say. So my first paper got desk rejected right away, or not desk rejected, but rejected without a rebuttal. But this was also in my student time, in my master thesis time. And the next paper, I got a step further. I got rejected after rebuttal, which was quite disappointing because I spent my whole holiday writing the rebuttal. But in the end, I managed to get the paper published somewhere else right now, and it is much better now. So in the end, I'm very happy about the reviews because they really helped me to improve the work and helped me to learn a lot. And so last try for me was last year, and it got accepted finally. And I think I've learned a lot throughout the process of trying several times getting a paper to MICCAI, but also I started to review for the MICCAI and had a lot of fun reviewing for the MICCAI. And actually I got this Outstanding Reviewer Award, which I was quite happy about. And yeah, so I think it is really important to have good reviews. And I think it's also important for us to attend these meetings to learn from others what they did, and especially from very experienced people we have right here. And that's why I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Finn. And I would like to hear from Yixuan. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Yixuan. I'm currently a postdoc fellow at Johns Hopkins University. So my research interests are mainly in the image formation for computational ultrasound and photoacoustic imaging. So it's more in the physics signal processing side. And also I work on co-robotic ultrasound, so something on medical robotics. I was mainly working on cancer diagnosis, majorly involving prostate cancer and breast cancer. So I have to be very honest. I might be the least experienced MICCAI submitter here. So anyone who's listening or attending the panel might be more experienced than me for MICCAI submission. I did try once, but I reached the page limit once I finished the method. So I submitted to a journal. But I'm an experienced, more experienced journal reviewer, and I have some grant experience. So probably, I think MICCAI Society just invited an outlier here. But I'm the same as you guys. I wish I can learn a lot of things from the panelists today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Yixuan. And next we have Hannah. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm Hannah. I'm in the final year of my PhD here at Technical University of Munich and Helmholtz Munich, and my research focuses on MRI reconstruction and more specifically motion correction, where I try to develop deep learning solutions that incorporate some imaging physics into the model. And yeah, I also submitted a paper to MICCAI 2 years ago, which was rejected, got an early rejection. I then submitted it to a workshop where it got accepted, and last year I submitted another paper, which was then accepted after the rebuttal phase. So I also have some mixed experiences, and yeah, I reviewed for MICCAI first time last year, and yeah, I did take my time, did a quite careful job, but was then still quite surprised to be honored as an outstanding reviewer in the end. But I think that showed me that basically everyone can do good reviews if you take your time, you do a careful job, and you review in a fair way, seeing both the strengths and the weaknesses of the paper. I think everyone is able to do that. So yeah, that's my conclusions, and looking forward to the next hour.
Thank you. And our last panelist is Igor. Can you tell us who you are and what you are working on these days?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the invitation also on my behalf. So I'm a final year PhD student at the University of Oulu. This is at the very north of Finland. And I have been researching during my PhD new osteoarthritis, so primarily related to diagnostic and progression modeling of that. So currently, I'm also looking into multimodal methods and translation studies related to robustness, which is quite crucial for MRI methods that work with MRI data, and also for into uncertainty estimation propagation. I would say it's quite similar to other panelists today. My first experience with MICCAI was rather perhaps negative. So my first paper that I submitted at the first year of my PhD got to the rebuttal phase, but still got rejected with the justification that it lacked novelty. I resubmitted it to a workshop of a major computer vision conference and got an oral presentation there. And as of today, that paper has more than 120 citations on Google Scholar, and I'm getting contacted by many different groups from Europe in relation to the method, to develop method. I would say every couple of months. So I would say that the paper was quite impactful at the end of the day, but didn't get perhaps enough recognition from MICCAI. But I moved forward, and the university of our policy that we need to publish more journal papers, so I focused more on that. And yeah, so I moved forward, and then I continued essentially with more like reviewing activities for MICCAI. And I have been reviewing already for 4 consecutive years. And out of those 4, I got 2 times recognized under honorable mention, 1 time as an outstanding reviewer. So I'm quite enjoying my, let's say, position as a reviewer for MICCAI nowadays, but also looking forward to get my papers eventually to the main conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Igor. Right, so we have a fantastic group of speakers, and I'm really excited to have you all here. Thanks so much for the great introductions. Now let's dive into our first discussion topic: what makes a good review? We will hear from our panelists about their review philosophy and how they provide fair and constructive feedback. So, for the first question, I think it will be good to start with Yixuan. And the first question will be, as a MICCAI reviewer, what guiding philosophy guides you thinking to reviewing, and how do you put that into practice to ensure your feedback is both fair and constructive?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I follow is honesty. So it's both the honesty to myself and to the authors. So since I'm not in my research focus is less on the deep learning side, usually whenever I'm assigned with a paper for like more deep learning based, I would inform the session chair immediately. Like if this is not my expertise or I have partial expertise, I would just inform them and see if I'm still a good reviewer for it. And also when I review a paper, I think I'm less in the shoe of a judge, but more serving as a learner and a helper. I think my role is more to help the authors to improve their paper. And also it's a learning experience for me, like if it's a cutting through technology, if they have any good idea. So maybe the third philosophy for myself is just to be neutral. I'm trying to be more objective. So I think it will be a later question, but usually I don't either criticize or encourage. I just say what I observed. Yeah, I guess that's my philosophy.
Thank you, Yixuan. How about Igor? Do you have something to add on?
Sure. Yeah, I personally like to feel myself as a part of MICCAI society. So to me, it's not only about the MICCAI conference. It's about the society and building the society eventually. And MICCAI is a scientific society primarily, but also lately includes more and more of practitioners. And as I see, basically, what is the goal? What are the goals of scientific society? Is to promote scientific excellence, right? So to grow and assist young researchers, to spread the knowledge and also learn, and also to build new fruitful collaborations. So I think my kind of philosophy is based on these foundations. So the way how we achieve this is basically just to encourage the the scientific culture. So really giving the people, given their resources enough input such that they can grow and take on the bigger, more risky and more ambitious studies, but do it in a more scientifically rigorous way. I think it's very important to be, as Yixuan said, to be honest and also constructive when providing the reviewers. So just putting yourself into the shoes of an author and always checking if what you are providing as your comments, you would be happy to receive yourself. I think that is very essential check always. And the culture of openness I also like. So whatever we do, it's great to be explicit. It's better to say things in more details than to not say them and let the counterpart guess basically what you have in mind. So basically constructive part is somehow natural to me. So I'm really also trying to improve myself and trying to be empathetic to the authors. So this is kind of natural. Being fair, I think, is perhaps a bit more difficult. And there are also some structural challenges in the way how the review process is set up. For example, I've been reviewing for multiple years and noticed that at some years you will usually you receive a limited number of papers, right? That's 5. And in some years you can receive papers that most of them are excellent. And even if you assess each individual paper, still there is a certain kind of threshold, right? So there is acceptance rates at the conference and it's not 100%. So you need to put a threshold somewhere. And if you receive a lot of excellent papers, you actually tend to maybe put down some of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are those papers are the bottom of the entire submission bank. And the same works other way. So if you receive papers and let's say 4 of them, they are more or less substandard, you may tend to put some of the papers up, so grade them higher than they actually are or than they actually deserve. So there are these challenges in the process. But I think that the best as a reviewer you can do is just to be open with yourself, be empathetic with the authors, and try to be as constructive as possible. Because what we do is essentially related to science, and the best way how you assess the science is by following what is written, for example, on Wikipedia regarding scientific process and trying to implement this in real life. So that's kind of my personal approach.
Yeah, thank you for providing a nice perspective. And how about Ajabola? Do you have any comments here?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I think if a fellow panelists have said most of the things that I also like to say, but we just had that one extra guiding principle or philosophy in addition to what has been said is trying to give each paper a fair shot, right? And that has to do with time. There's a way you review a paper if you are rushing, if you just want to within an hour, you just like skim through it, you look for a couple of things. If you don't find it, you'll be tempted to look for shortcomings, like if you don't give it enough time. So, but I tend to just say, okay, today, at least for this whole day, I want to be in the mind space of the author. I want to like, what is the author thinking when they wrote this paper? So I don't do any other thing. I just give it. I'm trying to be fair to the author, right? Because sometimes the author might not communicate their ideas well, but you see like, okay, this is what they're trying to say. Sometimes I read a paragraph 2 or 3 times, because maybe language barrier or English might not be the first language, that will actually help, in providing positive feedback that will help the author during the rebuttal phase. There are times where the comment that you give, the other reviewers might, negatively mark down the author, but then based on your comments you give, the author can use your comments, in the rebuttal, and you actually help the author for, against other reviewer, right? So I am trying to put myself in the shoe of the authors by, giving the paper a fair shot. I'll be as exhaustive as I can. So okay, the whole tutorial today, I'm in the mind space of the author, what's the author trying to say, and I do the very best. Yeah, that's just basically my philosophy. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing, Ajabola. Yeah, That will nicely lead us to the next question, which is how do you approach balancing criticism and encouragement in your reviews? And can you share an example how you have effectively communicated a major concern in a constructive way? Let's start with Finn.
Sure. So I think it is quite difficult to balance criticism and encouragement. But what I think is a good way is separating weaknesses from constructive comments. And in a sense that weaknesses are something the authors may use for their further work, while constructive comment can help them or should be addressed in the rebuttal. And I think what is also very important is to make this clear for the authors. So especially for MICCAI, where you have like a week of time and you are not allowed to do any experiments, you can tell it would be nice to have these experiments in the weaknesses, or tell, okay, these are missing, but you shouldn't do it as a constructive comment to say, I need these experiments to accept this paper because the authors are not allowed to do this. And this is something I've seen, and this is a bit frustrating for an author. So I think this is a very important point. And of course, I think what is another point is to provide examples. If you have like a major criticism, you shouldn't be very abstract, but you should say what you want to say, like what is missing, what can the author do, maybe not this time, but maybe in the next submission to make it better, or to learn from this critic. And yes, I think, and also what is very important, if you have like a very major critic, you should tell what you understand, such that the author can see what you are getting from what he wanted to say, and maybe he can address this in a rebuttal to say, okay, you got this wrong, and maybe I did get it wrong. But you should tell them what you think you understand, and not just what you think is wrong.
Yeah, thank you. And how about Yixuan?
Yeah, I agree with Finn. But one thing, what I do is I don't balance because I don't criticize or encourage. It's just I would like to be an observer. I provide what I see. It's not to the person, it's not to the work. Maybe there are a lot of things to improve, then it will be a major revision. If there are like major flaws, it can be a reject. If it's really a breakthrough idea, it can be like accepted, but I don't think it's criticism or encouragement, just to myself. But when I review, I usually organize my comments in 3 sections. One is called major concerns. The second is medium concern, and the last one might be minor. So I guess it's important to understand what's a major concern to begin with. So from my understanding, I think the very first thing is a fit for MICCAI, like the topics in MICCAI or the sub areas. If it's not aligned, then probably this is not the place to publish. And also there can be ethical and integrity issues. For example, plagiarism or like manipulated data. These are like major concerns. And in terms of the paper writing, so I think there might be scientific soundness and novelty, but for novelty, usually it's not easy to judge. So if I'm an expert on the area and I have read previous papers, which are pretty similar, I would probably point it out as a major concern. Otherwise, I would leave it. I would take more attention on the methods and experiments and see if there has been like reproducibility issues, which by the way is a major emphasis by MICCAI Society, and look at the data quality, or like if there's sufficient experiments And then for results, I would check statistical validation, like for deep learning. Overfitting can be a pretty common issue. And maybe for like figures, there can be misleading visualizations. And lastly, I would check probably writing quality and organization. These are the major concerns. So if I'm giving one example, I think so when I was a reviewer, there was one paper reporting all fancy results, very, very promising outcome. But their imaging resolution is a little deceiving from my eye. So they claimed a very good number, but in their image, it actually doesn't appear as good as it looks. So what I did is I was asking for more information to begin with. I asked the authors if they can provide the forwards have maximum value, or just give us a -3 dB contour plot to see if this image resolution is true as good. And then in the rebuttal, they did provide partial information. So I just keep digging. I didn't criticize or encourage them to do anything, but it's more on the methodology. Eventually, it turned out to be a like post-processing issue from the ultrasound machine. But I think that's an example I can give for a major concern.
Thank you, Yixuan. Okay, so far we have heard some interesting views on review philosophy and communication strategy when balancing the criticism and encouragement. And okay, so let's move on to the next topic, which we'll discuss about novelty and rating of the submission. And the first question will be, how do you evaluate the novelty and significance of a MICCAI submission, and what does novelty mean to you? Let's start with Benjamin. Can you jump in here?
So I think this is a very central topic to when you review or when you submit a paper, because usually the first, like a lazy reviewer, the first thing you would say is like, oh, lack of novelty or something. And then it's like this is actually bad for the field, because now there's like this race towards novelty. And usually what people mean by novelty is like you need to outperform the state of the art. But then if you look at the papers, you have like what? 1,000, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating, but like few hundreds paper per year at MICCAI. It's very unlikely that all of them outperform the state of the art. So what I mean by this is like, it's okay if you don't beat the state of the art. There are other ways to be novel. And this needs to be taken into account by reviewers and by people that submit their papers. So okay, so we said outperforming is one part of the novelty. Another part of the novelty is like, okay, maybe I don't outperform, but maybe I'm more robust than other methods. Like I perform more or less the same, but except that now I'm much more robust to outliers. This is like some sort of novelty. So here is like more novelty in the results. Then there can be novelties also in the application. So you might not outperform the state of the art, but you propose a method that is methodologically novel with a new idea that people didn't explore before. So this is novelty. And sometimes you can show that this is a promising avenue of research without like, beating necessarily the state of the art. So this is like another part. And then I think also, which is very important at MICCAI, the novelty can be in the application. So you can use something that already exists, but apply it to a new problem, showing that, okay, now I have some algorithm that I can deploy, for example, in the clinic and to make a real impact. So this is some sort of novelty. So yeah, all in all, I think it's like novelty in the results. So do you outperform or are you more robust, that type of stuff. Novelty in the methods. Do you have a new idea? which is promising and that would foster discussion at the conference. And the last kind of novelty is in the application. And if you are going to review papers at MICCAI this year, and it's been also the case for many years now, pay attention to this, because if a paper brings some application novelty, this is completely valid for MICCAI. So don't reject this paper just because of this.
Thank you for your constructive insight, Benjamin. And how about Hannah? What do you mainly look for when judging a paper's contribution?
I have to say, I fully agree with Benjamin. That was also what I wanted to say for that question. I myself also experienced it, that when working on a new application of a method that already exists, people judge it as less valuable. But in my opinion, for a method to really translate into the clinics, we need to show that it works for different applications and that it works robustly. So in my opinion, it is much more important that the work is in general described in high quality, that there is a relevant motivation for the method or for applying it to a new application, and that there are proper evaluations conducted, and also that the authors do not claim something that is not backed up by their data. This I have seen in several reviews, and yeah, for me that is really something that makes my rating get reduced a lot, because I think you should really be honest also as an author. Yeah, and yeah, I have to support Benjamin fully that just criticizing novelty is a little bit too easy for reviewers. You should look more carefully.
Thank you, Hannah. How about Finn?
Yeah, I also agree. I think maybe to add something, instead of looking at novelty, sometimes it's useful to ask yourself if it's interesting for someone. And if it is, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be novel, but it should like inspire others, and also particularly application of existing methods to novel problems is a very good thing to do, because we cannot all invent the new, I don't know, REST next to, if you're talking about deep learning or whatever. I think there's the possibilities of getting new architectures there is saturating a little bit, and often it's more about data, but more about clever engineering to get something work for a different problem. And this is definitely a good contribution then, and a very interesting contribution, which is very valuable for others also. And maybe just so what I think is a very important thing of a paper is a good discussion, of course, but also to incorporate limitations that are right and meaningful limitations that others could work on, not just limitations to have some limitations, which is actually done by the authors already, but something which is missing right now, and which a new PhD student, for example, could go on and start working on and extending the field.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think this is a really good point that all MICCAI society should share. Yeah. And we will talk about the rating system. So can you briefly describe how you go about the MICCAI submission from initial rating to the final score? And what factor carry the most weight in your decision? And what are any common reasons that you tend to lower your rating? Let's begin with Hannah. What do you think?
So for me, when I get a paper to review, is that I first read the paper very thoroughly and I just highlight everything that comes to my mind. So whether it's good things, whether it's questionable parts, whether I don't understand something or I immediately see something that might be a little bit criticized. And then, so I do this once, and then I go through again and look at all my comments, especially at the parts that I didn't understand, at the questions I had, and try to really understand everything and sort the comments a little bit, and like throw out the things that I misunderstood. And then in the next step, I go through the comments once more and try to sort them a little bit by topic, into strengths and weaknesses, and then again into major and more minor comments, topic-wise, but also, yeah, based on how important those concerns are. And then when I try to judge like what final score I would give the paper, I try to look at the strengths and the weaknesses, but also at my general feeling about the paper, because I feel like often you don't write down as many strengths as weaknesses. So a good paper might have more weaknesses than strengths in the review, but could still be a good paper. So basically, I just look at the weaknesses or the concerns and think about, could the authors change those in a rebuttal? So if it's like clear experiments missing, then of course this cannot be changed, because for MICCAI there is no time to add any experiments. But if it's more like toning down claims or adding some discussion that could be solved, then it's more in the direction of a weak reject or weak accept, depending on how good the paper is. And then I think regarding the second part of your question, if there's something where I would lower my rating, so I've already mentioned before, like if the paper makes too strong claims that are not supported by the data, that's definitely a point. And I think in general, if there's insufficient evaluation, and I don't mean by that you need to have 10 comparisons methods and like 10 different metrics on 10 different data sets, but you should do it thoroughly and also discuss all the evaluations you performed. I think that's the major points.
Thank you for sharing. And how about Igor?
Yeah, sure. I have some points on top of what Hannah presented. I personally try to take my own physiology out of equation. So I try to approach the reviewing of any paper in several sessions. So the first ones were quite similar to what Hannah presented, just going very thoroughly through the paper, just marking everything that you think is a minor or major concern, just for yourself to return to this later. And then if I need to go and catch up with prior art, so I do this basically after reading the paper. And then I just let it basically boil in my head and try to think, considering all what I highlighted, is the paper net accept or net reject? So is it on the rather positive or rather negative side? Almost never you get a paper that is perfect. So you are most of the time in this kind of gray area, and you need to draw a decision boundary somewhere. So it's I think that the main challenge for reviewer. And so after the first session, I perhaps skip a couple of days, and then I return back to my markings. I put everything into the reviewing form. I think over the past years it has been refined quite nicely by the MICCAI Society, and just start putting all the major comments and major advantages of the paper. And I try also to do a bit of quantitative approach. So I try to put them into several groups, not only major and minor comments, but also if a comment is critical or just major. So critical means by no sense, if this is not addressed during the rebuttal, the paper goes in at least like through my review. And I do the same for the advantages. So there are some soft advantages, there are some really strong advantages of a paper, some really interesting applied novelty, for example, or some very interesting original idea. So all of those, they're kind of summarized. And then I look at this list of advantages and limitations, and then make my final decision. Going to what would be the critical limitations for me, I would say I see this more and more in the recent years, that there are many papers that are completely lacking some statistical analysis or reporting of confidence intervals. And I personally think this is a really major issue. And all of us as scientists, we should put some time into really studying statistics. I have seen papers where the authors do evaluation on another data set with 10 samples, 1 out of which is a positive class, and then the report accuracy of 90%, which to me looks a bit fishy because it's 90%, yes, but there is no way that you can confidently say that it's 90%. The sample size is too small, so you need to conduct certain kind of statistical analysis that is meaningful to the hypothesis you are testing, to the question you are answering with the paper. So that's number one. Then I think the overall organization of the paper is very important. So once it's well structured, you can really grasp in very fine details what the authors did, and you can see really fine methodological limitations or strengths or some interesting solutions there. The writing itself, it shouldn't be super clear. Of course, if the paper is written by a native speaker, it's a pleasure to read, but there are papers who are perhaps not that fluent in language, and this is fine to me. But you shouldn't use a substandard English. That's a hard no, I'd say. And then I think also maybe 2 more things. The related work, I have seen some papers that are completely missing related work, just ignoring everything that has been done, citing a couple of papers, and that's it. I think as scientists, we should do some reasonable effort, basically, to study before we run any experiment what has been done, or at least get some kind of grasp of what is the prior art in your domain, in your problem that you're working on. And then finally, reproducibility. I think, again, once the paper is nicely structured and describes all the essential details, I think reproducibility is not an issue. So as an expert, I can, for example, reproduce something. But if something is really missing, some kind of hyperparameters, you're not sure how they are set up, by which logic. I think at that point, I would expect to have a source code with the paper. So, of course, there are certain things that are more or less that can be proprietary. So certain things that you cannot report about your data if the data is sensitive. But I think there should be reasonable effort to really make this a reproducible paper, in a sense that another person, another researcher can at least build some proof of concept and then optimize on their data and then basically build on top of your own advances.
Thanks for sharing. How about Ajabola? Do you have another opinion about this?
Yeah, thank you. So I don't have a different opinion, just additional opinions. For me, I would say I look for, in addition to what has been said, 4 classes of statements. When I read the paper for the first time, I read it thoroughly. I'm looking for 4 groups of statements. The first kind of statement, problem statement, like key statement. I highlight key statement that's trying to describe or highlight what problem they're trying to solve. And for every problem statement that I highlight, I put a comment on what I feel I expect down the line regarding them solving that problem. I've had papers where they describe one kind of problem at the beginning, and then all of the results support a different kind of. It doesn't provide evidence for the exact problem. For example, you describe problem of the complexity of deep learning models, right? Increase quadratic complexity, and then all of your metric is just die-score segmentation, right? You don't give any metric that shows that your method improves the complexity of state-of-the-art, the complexity, increase in complexity with time, for example. So there's a mismatch in there between the problem, the statement, the way you introduce the paper and your output, right? So, and then statements on the contribution, exact statement on contribution. There are times where authors repeat the contribution statements on their contribution, and the second time they repeat it, it's slightly different. Maybe they're trying to paraphrase, but in the process of paraphrasing, they make a new addition to the statement that it's significantly different from. For example, in the abstract, they might say, "Oh, our key contributions are this and that," and then in the introduction, it's 2 or 3, 1 extra contribution, and that contribution is slightly different from, there's a mismatch. Every single time they mention their contribution, is a new word or new phrase added that changes, what you're supposed to expect from the paper, right? And also, I look for statements that that explain how their approach is different from state of the art, right? Like that's where the literature review comes into play. So I like key statements that say, okay, state of the art try this, but we are introducing this, and give a reason, rationale, right? So sometimes, authors just say, okay, we use this, we added this, and there's no rationale that explaining why you think this components or this adding these blocks to an existing model would improve. We added this and it works. Why? There should be some kind of explain the rationale somehow, right? And finally, statements on each ablation study. I'm a big fan of like ablation study. If your methodology, you're introducing some new concept, a new way of a new block in a deep learning model, for example, I would expect in the results that you do some kind of ablation, like show the difference in performance when you introduce, the component, right? With or without the component, how did that affect your results? So just those kind of key statements. When I find them, I like them, and I expect, So for reasons for lowering ratings, I've been. And when I find like some interesting statements in the introduction or even in the methods, saying that, oh, we introduced this component, for example, we introduce a novel way of computing convolution, right? And then I look at the results, there's a mismatch between what they introduce in the methodology and the results, So when there's significant mismatch between what you overpromise and you underdeliver, right? So I think that tends to be a lot of times when I see like this over-promising, like, oh, I have that disposition. So, okay, this is a good paper. And then the results, there's a under-deliver, you don't deliver what you promise in the method or even the introduction. You start very big and the results, it's relatively underwhelming, right? So that's the reason why, scenarios that leads to lower ratings. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your insight. And now I want to talk about the common pitfalls or weakness in MICCAI submission, especially from the first-time submitters or junior researchers. And Benjamin, any advice that you can give to the authors to avoid such pitfalls?
So I think the previous panelists have already given lots of advice on things to avoid, Ajabola, Igor, all the others. So I think for my part, what I will add here is that basically as a first-time submitter to MICCAI, I think the hardest part in submitting a paper is knowing into what level of detail you have to go, because you don't know what the others people do. So you have to balance things, and that's the hard. And this comes with experience. So I think first advice would be to read a lot of other papers to see how people do things, and that's how we all learn. Another problem with first-time submissions is that basically it's hard to learn how to explain something properly, because you've been working on something, if it's your first submission, for like 1 or 2 years, so that's the only thing you know. And to you, there's nothing outside of this world. And to you, it seems normal that everybody understands what you're doing. But this is very, very wrong. Like a lot of people are doing completely different things. And the thing is, like at MICCAI, you can be reviewed by people who don't know much actually about your stuff. I think this happened to all of us. Like sometimes you can write to the area chair saying like, sorry, but like this is really not my expertise. But most of the time they would just ignore this request. So you're stuck with the paper and you don't know much about this. And it makes things so easier if the authors explain things properly, because for you now it's like, okay, I understand and I can make a fair judgment out of this. So, and I think a way to easily check that is, once you have written your paper, give it to a colleague who is not working in your field. So still probably in medical imaging, right? But give your paper to be proofread by someone else, just to make sure that they can understand what's going on here. And if they don't, that's a bad sign, because at MICCAI, when we review paper, we want the larger community to be able to understand what's going on, because the goal, the ultimate goal, of course, is to give you an oral if the paper is good. And we're not going to give orals to people who are not able to make their research widely understandable by the community. So, yeah, those are the things. My two advice: read a lot of papers to understand how people write paper in general. And the second is, once you have written your paper, give it to someone else. Get some outsider perspective on this to know where you can improve and how you can improve, and especially in the methods section to properly explain what you're doing.
That is a great advice. Thank you, Benjamin. And right, so yeah, thanks everyone for the engaging discussion, and let's continue to the next section. Now let's talk about the bad reviews. We will cover 3 questions regarding the bad reviews. So the first question is, could you briefly share an example or characteristic of what you consider a bad review? Let's start with Hannah.
Sure. So I didn't bring an example, but I think in general, I would say if it becomes obvious that the reviewer did not take enough time, so if they just wrote very little or very vague, unjustified comments, that's quite obvious. Sometimes you can also clearly see that the reviewers want to get their own work cited, and that's obviously not meant to be in a review. Then sometimes there's also irrelevant requests or too high standards. That's obviously more difficult to judge. It depends really on the field. And of course, a review should also not be unpolite or unfair in general. And like what my supervisor always told me and my group when we were talking about reviewing is that we should think about if we want to have our name published under the reviews. And I think that is in general a really good advice for everyone reviewing. If you stand there with your name, you're probably more polite, you're more fair, and yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Ben, can you share your experience?
Well, I do not have much to add here. I think I have the same points for this, especially for not requesting any citations, even though they are not like, I also got some requests which were obviously just by typing the keywords of my paper and seeing what is out there and suggesting me, why didn't you consider this, which had nothing to do with my paper. So that was clear, okay, the reviewer did not really read or did not really understand what my work was about. And I think this is a really bad thing also if he's unpolite or the reviewer is unpolite. And also sometimes they have made their decision and you can see that you can do nothing about it anymore. And regardless what you write in rebuttal, the decision is made. And so that is actually something which is quite bad. But yeah, I think that's from my side.
Thank you, Finn. How about Igor? Do you have any comments here?
Yeah, perhaps a couple of things to add. So I personally think that the bad reviews are non-constructive and non-explicit. So I think we should just understand what is the problem, right? With that we are kind of seen as a bad review. So as an author, if I receive something and I disagree, that's number one, right? But like where this disagreement comes from, it's basically I have my own criteria in mind, how I assess the quality of my paper, and I weigh them in a certain way. And the reviewer has their own criteria that they weigh in a certain way, right? So essentially, it's a kind of miscommunication. That's how I see it. So, so the reviewer should ideally provide a really explicitly like what are the criteria they use to grade the paper. I think once this part is there, it already relieves a lot of stress, basically, and pressure and negativity from the whole process. And the second part is, I think as a reviewer, it should be really constructive. So if you're non-constructive, you are not giving clear instruction how, or clear suggestion how the authors should change the paper in order to make it through, or you are giving some comments that clearly you didn't model in your head, and like they're clearly not possible to address within the rebuttal period. So that it can be also a frustration. So, but once you're constructive, so you really think, okay, what could be the concrete step the authors could make to basically change the paper such that it passes your quality control. So that's the constructive aspect. And then try to, if it's a borderline paper, you're not sure, you're leaning towards accept, you're leaning towards reject. So really try to put all the things together that are in your mind, that are really critical for you, basically, when you assess the paper, such that the authors can also be proactive in principle to try to address some of your concern. Maybe they can bring some additional references to rebuttal, really give a different perspective on the problem. But if you don't give them that points to respond to, basically you are just there is no communication. So and that brings, I think, the trouble in the process.
Thank you, Igor. And I would like to talk about the common mistakes that reviewers make when writing their reviews. And I think Benjamin can share his experience.
So I think the number one mistake that people do when that reviewers do when writing their reviews is that they don't take time. They don't take enough time. I think Igor was saying before that sometimes it takes like several days. Okay, to be honest, I never took several days to do that, but usually my metric is like a review is taking me half a day to do. And then usually I take a break in the middle, think about stuff. So people need to understand that, because like some people, they do their reviews in half an hour. In half an hour, it's impossible to read the paper, write constructive reviews, really try to get to the bottom of things, etc. Okay, so once you take some time, of course, you're going to start writing much more motivated decisions on your stuff. Also, sometimes it's okay to want to reject a paper. You don't have like always to say to get to the very bottom of things, trying to understand. Sometimes like it's plain to see that the paper is not good. But here, I think what's important is also to highlight the promising aspects of the method. It's not like all negative. There are some positives, and also a review, especially when you submit your work for the first time, is an opportunity to get some feedback on your work. And as a reviewer, it's important to give some feedback and some constructive feedback, or sometimes like suggestions, like, oh, maybe your method is not good in that aspect, but have you tried this? Or maybe you could try that. Like, so instead of just saying like, yeah, lack of novelty, the results are not convincing, and what's the other one? Like missing baselines. Okay, maybe like I would say that half of the reviews have the three, and that's a super combo, and that's so that would be a bad reviews. So yeah, just like the other said before, motivate your reviews, but as soon as you take the time, normally it comes naturally to come and to explain your decision. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Thank you, Benjamin. And the next question is, have you personally experienced or seen an especially ineffective review? If yes, what made it ineffective or frustrating for the authors? How about Ajabola?
Thank you. I think it's this question is quite similar. Or that my response to it is my experience is similar to the point made by Benjamin. They are like standard template of someone just look at it like limited novelty, or the results are not convincing. Those kind of just like a one word or a word few statements review. And the reviewer you don't know what to make out of it. Like it's just like if and especially when you have if it's you have 3 reviews and one reviewer does that and the other 2 reviewers give more detail, right? And you're doing like a a rebuttal, you don't even know how to address the comment of the one reviewer that just says, is not convinced by the result, So, so it could be frustrating. And sometimes also, I can see where the reviewer is coming from. For example, there's a paper I reviewed where from the introduction, I could tell that where the paper was going, it's leaning in the direction of not of reject, right? So for example, the problem that the author set out to solve, because like they were trying to investigate the effect of compression on, for example, on performance of a known method, right? So it's an application problem, but I could just say, okay, the problem is not a very novel problem. They're not introducing novel method, right? So the temptations, you just want to say, okay, yeah, let me just skip to the very end. It's not novel and just, but, I decided to just think in the perspective of, well, this might not be a MICCAI paper, but it could be a useful paper elsewhere. So then I started reviewing the paper as though they're submitting for something else, right? So in my comments, I said, okay, although this paper is like reject, but, these are the kind of things they can still, based off of what is submitted, they use a known method, ResNet 3D, the problem has been tackled so many times now, but if they had these elements to it, not for MICCAI, but for something else, it would help, improve the paper. So, I felt like if I spent like half a day or a day on other papers and I go to this paper, it just seems like 30 minutes I can be done with it. I said, no, let me give it a fair shot, and just imagine I'm reviewing it for some other, so, when I believe, that will also help authors, right? So the author might get disappointed that the paper was rejected, but they get a lot of comments on what they can do to improve the paper if they're submitting elsewhere. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajabola. And how about Yixuan?
Yeah, so I have several items, and in addition to listing some maybe like bad reviews, I'll probably also give some advice on how to answer these comments. So the first thing specific to MICCAI is sometimes there can be unreasonable requests, meaning that since MICCAI does not allow adding experiments to the rebuttal, but still sometimes reviewers is asking for it. Yeah, I would say sometimes true. The work is limited. If we can show more data, that would be better. But one suggestion to the like people who submit the paper is just to add it in limitation in the discussion. Just describe how it can be improved in future work. And the second thing is there's sometimes bad reviews are lack of justification, as other panelists has mentioned already. It's pretty straightforward, just saying no novelty and not giving reason. And sometimes it can be harsh or rude tones. These justifications can be easily addressed usually. This is the reason why MICCAI invite multiple reviewers for one paper, right? And also these review comments are open to everyone, to all the reviewers after the first initial submission. So once this reviewer, who's maybe harsh or rude, see the others' comments, he or she may realize it's probably unprofessional. So all you have to do is just reply politely if it has been addressed in the manuscript, just point it out. And usually these reviewers are the one who don't have time. So actually, if you respond like point by point, they will just let you go easily for later rounds. And sometimes there can be misunderstanding from a reviewer. So just respond politely, explain again in like brief language. And the last thing I would like to say is probably there can be lack of field knowledge. I've seen a lot of reviews from MICCAI just saying that for very novel imaging modality, they're just rejecting a paper for lack of data. For example, if it's a deep learning work, reviewers just say you don't have enough training sample. But actually they don't understand how hard it is to even get ground truth for a new field. So it can be a bad review. You probably need to educate the reviewers a little bit on like how cutting edge this technology is. Probably you are the only group who's working on it and how difficult it is to get ground truth data. That's all from me.
Thank you, Yixuan.
We have one question from the chat, if we can quickly address that too. And it kind of touches base upon what Ajabola said and what Finn said earlier. It's how do you evaluate interdisciplinary papers that may not be technically novel in one field, but highly innovative at the intersection of AI and medicine, let's say. So what do you do in that case? It's open to everyone who wants to answer.
Maybe I can start. Yeah, I think this concept of applied novelty is very much unspecified. And I personally, my personal take on this is a lot of methodological novelty actually comes from new formulation of problems or new data. So, for example, we have seen a lot of, let's say, cardiac segmentation, right? Where we segment more or less blobby structures or certain kind of brain tumors. But recently, for example, we see a lot of data in terms of vascular analysis, right? So, and there, your conventional loss functions, for example, that you used to apply, they stopped working. Or, for example, registration of vascular networks. So it really comes to the point, okay, now you need to really go into the map and think what would be those similarity metrics or loss functions that really work for this kind of data. So I'm personally very excited when people just go and segment new tissue that hasn't been segmented before from any kind of available clinical modality or new kind of lesion, for example. And I really, if I see the novelty there, and I'm, for example, really specializing in this domain, so I would really put this as a major strength of the paper. So I think you can come up with new methods in certain problems, just taking existing data and then corrupting in a certain way and saying, this is my synthetic problem that kind of resembles some problem in reality. You can do that, and most of the time it works fine, but there is still kind of a sailing basically to this kind of approach. Sometimes you just need to go and have new data from more scanners, or from just if you're doing some kind of intervention study, just from the process that includes more actors now, and get a new formulation of a problem that's really exciting to study.
Yeah, thank you, Igor. So let's continue to the next section, which will be how to raise rating through rebuttal. So in this section, we'll talk about how to raise rating through rebuttal. And I guess many students are really interested in this section, so let's hear from our outstanding reviewers. Let's begin with Hannah. So the first question is, what makes a rebuttal convincing enough for you to reconsider your original rating?
As I already mentioned when I described my process of writing a review, I already think about this when I write the initial review, which concerns I raise that should be addressed in the rebuttal. And I think then it really depends on the paper itself. So obviously for MICCAI, I don't expect new experiments, but if there's other concerns that I raise that are possible to change in the rebuttal, yeah, but I think that's really specific and difficult to give a general answer. But I would make it clear in my review comments what I expect to be changed.
Thank you, Hannah. And Finn. Yeah, would you like to?
I can maybe add briefly something. I think what authors should not do is being unpolite, even though they don't like the opinion of the reviewer. Even though the reviewer might be wrong, it will harm the authors if they are unpolite, because you get nothing from it, and also the other reviewers can see what other reviewers are saying, and they can also see if the reviewer is clearly wrong, and the editors as well, they can see that, they can see it in relation here. So you don't have to be unfair here. But like, I think what you should avoid in a rebuttal is like just go on the easy ones, and the ones that are already convinced from your work that give you a good rating. Of course, you should address these comments as well, but I think if there's a reviewer who has a major concern, which is right, other reviewers might also see it, and if you don't answer it properly, you will not be accepted in the final stage by the editors, pretty sure.
Thank you, Finn. Then let's bring Igor here. Yeah, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, as I mentioned previously, so I have this system where I add 1 or 2 pluses or 1 or 2 minuses basically to my comments and categorizing them into major and critical. And I think I'm doing, since I'm actually spending time on this and trying really to make my review accessible and constructive, I'm personally expecting that the authors address the critical comments, which, surprise, surprise, often is not the case. But what I really appreciate is that the authors try to write an explicit and really detailed response to every single critical comment that I raise, because I think they are really major to really have, for the study to have scientific validity. And yeah, if the rebuttal is basically really detailed and clear, and you see that the authors really respond to everything, and where they don't want to do any extra work, they bring a solid justification. I think that's enough for me to change my rating. But if certain comments are not addressed, for example, the one regarding statistical analysis, I would still propagate this and still keep it as a minus, basically. And I would make a comment on this to other reviewers.
Thank you for your comment. And I would like to hear some example of rebuttal that successfully improved the rating. I would like to hear from Ajabola. Please share your experience.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so I had the rebuttal experience last year, that's MICCAI 2024. And so I'll share a couple of things that worked for me, can work for others too. I think the first thing is to start by focusing on any common shortcoming or any common criticism across all the reviewers. So if there's a criticism that's mentioned by all reviewers, for example, maybe for reviewer 1, it might be like a critical criticism. Maybe reviewer 2, it's not that it was just like a suggestion, or it's not, but as long as it's mentioned, because if reviewer 2 does not highlight it but doesn't see it as like a major criticism, the moment they see that reviewer 1 highlighted it as a major, it can bias, it can sort of bias their thinking after the rebuttal and make them shift it from a minor concern to a major concern, right? So if it's a common criticism, whether it's major or minor, mentioned by all reviewers, address that first, right? Because every reviewer would see, once they mention, no reviewer wants to make light of what somebody else calls a major criticism. So the very first thing, any common criticism, major or minor, address those ones first, right? And then next, if whichever reviewer gives you the lowest rating, because the problem is you have limited number of characters. You don't have much space to address all comments, right? So address common shortcomings first, and then if there's a reviewer that gives you a relatively lower score, it's typically advisable to focus on their at least for me, focus on the criticisms, leftover criticisms that are unique to just that reviewer, and it will help if any other reviewer has made a positive comment about that addresses their comment, right? So for example, if reviewer 1 in their, when they're talking about the positive things about your paper, if they mention some point that addresses the criticism of reviewer 2, you can just say, oh, as mentioned by reviewer 1, then I can just like briefly reiterate what reviewer 1 says. So, that also helps. It helps to pick out some of the positive things in some of the reviews that addresses criticism of other reviewers. So if you do it that way, it just shows that, okay, you know, it's you get like some kind of validation that way, right? So those are two majors. And one final thing is if possible, you can maybe give a citation, especially if you're defending, if you're trying to defend a point you made that there's some misunderstanding on, you can give an extra citation, right? To say, okay, you know, you can cite a work and said, you know, this similar approach was attempted here. So I believe that, you know, especially when it comes to the metric, if a comment is made on the, you know, benchmarking, right? For example, right? You know, if especially in my field, for example, there are not a lot of methods to benchmark against, right? So it's tricky to give a defense of that, right? So, but if you find a similarly novel application, right, in MICCAI or in a high-rated journal, and you sort of state that your approach for benchmarking is similar to, you know, that way it gives you something to stand on, right? For statements that are or criticisms that are more difficult to explain away. Right? You know, so those are the three major things that worked for me. Right. So highlighting common shortcomings, you know, picking positive comments from some reviewers and using to explain to as a validation for some of the criticism of some other reviewers, and citing, giving some citation where possible.
Thank you for sharing. So the next question is, are there certain rebuttal strategy that authors commonly use, but which typically fall to convince reviewers? Benjamin, please share your thoughts.
So, okay, I'll try to be brief. One thing that I really don't like is, oh, we'll address this in future work. Like that's sometimes the case, and it's just like, okay, sometimes when it's really out of the scope, like you can do this, but like when you're asking, and this is an ablation or something that is obvious, and the authors just say like, yeah, we'll do it in future work, they're kind of making fun of you in a way, or maybe not, but you know, it's okay. That's what I okay. This is it for me. I'm trying to be brief here, so that's the one thing I will highlight for this.
Thank you, Benjamin. How about Asian?
Yeah, I'll just add one thing. So the the tricks I've seen from reviewers is to make it vague and not a point-to-point response. So it can be a very long response. It seems that they've added a lot, but actually I have to spend 10 minutes first to figure out which question they're addressing. And then it turned out they're just partially addressing or missing a lot of information. So this can be a bad response somehow. That's it.
Thank you for your comment. And the next question is, do you find concise rebuttal more effective, or is detail necessary to fully address your concerns? Yeah, let's begin with Benjamin again.
So yes, so I think this is a question that we will tackle a bit also later. But in general, I mean, at MICCAI, we don't really have the option. Rebuttals must be short, just because we have limited characters. But if you don't want to piss the meta reviewers and the area chairs too much, keep your rebuttals short, because when you're an area chair, and ultimately those are the people that are going to make the decisions, right? So like when you're an area chair and you have like 10 papers to read the reviews, read the rebuttals, is a lot of work. So you need to prioritize. Usually what I recommend to do is like you have a very short summary of the comments you're trying to address. In parentheses, you can say, okay, this was related to reviewer 1 and 2, for example, and then you address it. And you have like this list you need to prioritize, and at the end you can say very shortly like, yeah, we'll add some extra figures for this, we'll add a little paragraph adding more citations for this bit of the literature review that I missed. Like these are not very important concerns or like easily addressable concerns. So prioritize your stuff and do a short rebuttal, because nobody wants to go through like pages and pages of stuff. And it's, you know, like reviewers and area chairs are human. So, and we're all lazy here. So it's just make a short rebuttal is better.
Thank you, Benjamin. How about Hannah?
I don't think I have much to add here. Maybe, like, I fully agree with you, be as concise as possible, but address all the major concerns. Like, don't make it as short as possible and then throw some of the concerns out, because that makes reviewers then angry. But yeah. I mean, at MICCAI, it's anyways irrelevant. You don't have much space.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. How about Igor?
Yeah, contrary to the previous panelist, I think for me it would be a longer rebuttal, but I have a bias since I publish more in the journals. So please don't listen to my advice here and listen to advice of Benjamin and Hannah.
Thank you, Igor. And the last question is, what is your biggest advice to authors on what not to do in a rebuttal? Let's start with Ajabola.
Yeah, thank you. I would say, of course, the biggest thing is not to take a adversarial approach to your response. Like, if most likely it's best to start by thanking the reviewers, just like thank them for it. It's a very small, like a liner. It's always a good idea. Don't come off with the energy like, okay, you're trying to, it doesn't help. It doesn't help your case. So definitely don't do that. And then secondly, I would say don't try to address all the comments, right? So because if you try to address all comments of all the reviewers, you end up spending very little time on some data. Just you start by ranking which is the most. You might end up just addressing 3 or only 4 comments, and the rest, the ones that are the most important, right? So you spend more time addressing those ones, right? So you can't address all the comments, right? So I've said those are the 2 things. So don't take an adversarial approach and pick your battles, right? So okay, I think it's the best if I focus on these 3. The reviewers can, I won't say overlook, but you can, if you address some major ones, the rest, you can just put a statement or two to cover the rest of the other comments. But there's the major criticisms, address those ones sufficiently.
Thank you, Ajabola.
Ajabola. Yeah, okay. We have a couple of questions from the audience. In the consideration of time, I'll try to squeeze them into one question. So, first is, how long should a good review be? Which is also, I think, partly answered before. But the second question is, how to react to my rebuttal if reviewers disagree on a specific point? So, for example, some of the reviews are like explanations, okay, results not convincing, and reviewer 2 says explanation not good, results okay. So very like vague, abstract-ish sort of reviews. Then how do you react to that? And can you use them to basically partially defend your paper? So any feedback on that?
I
Maybe
can maybe say,
okay.
oh, Ajabola, go ahead. I've been talking lots. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's a good question. So I would say it's good to like you rightly said, pick the positive elements of each review. So the reviewer one who said like the results are okay, right? Even though they didn't, even though the reviewer one did not give more details into what it means by okay, just speculate, just say, oh, review one, as review one said, the results are okay. Then just like put in like a statement highlighting what you feel the reviewer means by okay, and then you address the reviewer 2, stating that the method, the experiments are okay, and then just highlight a point like, you believe that we of the opinion that the way we describe the experiment using this is sufficient for, you can use, I think also language too. How you using what like sufficient, you believe that it's sufficient. I think the word sufficient is a good you also don't want to oversell your methods or your results, right? So you say you believe that it's enough, it's sufficient to address the comments. So you pick the positive components of each review and add extra elements from your experience or from the paper, and I think that would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Ajabola. Yeah, so we are done with the webinar, and yeah, so this is the end of our session, and huge thank to our incredible panelists for their time and thoughtful insights. And thank you all of you for joining us today. And don't forget to follow the MICCAI Student Board on social media and check out our upcoming events. And until next time, stay curious and stay connected. Goodbye, everyone, and see you next time.
You, bye bye.
Thank you.